to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. And today we get to talk with two people who I've gotten to know a little bit and enjoy very much. We have Michelle Troseth and Tracy Christopherson, who my screen reader says Christopherson, which I think is kind of funny. It ought to really learn the King's English, but what can I, or at least Swedish, but you know, we cope. But they have, I think, an interesting story to tell. They are co-founders of a company, and I'm sure they're going to tell us about that along with all sorts of other stuff. So we're really glad that you're here listening, and we're glad that Tracy and Michelle are here to talk with us. So I want to welcome both of you to Unstoppable Mindset.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be here.
Yes, we are.
Well, cool. I'm excited to have you. So that's as good as it gets, and we can all have fun. It's always one of the rules of doing this podcast, I tell people, is we do have to have fun. So that is important. Well, tell me about your lives a little bit, growing up, sort of early years of Tracy and Michelle, or Michelle and Tracy, whichever one of you wants to talk first.
This is Michelle. I'll go first.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, I'll go first. And we did grow up together in many ways. We're still growing, Michael. So our background is we're both from the state of Michigan, and we started out our careers in healthcare. And I'm a nurse, and actually Tracy and I we met early in our careers. We cared for patients together, and then we became leaders. We went into leadership roles. And we kind of grew up as leaders, learned our leadership skills, and we started working with a phenomenal mentor who was changing practice environments in hospitals. And we joined that journey with her and did a lot of transformation work in hospitals across North America. We ended up in corporations as executives. And then in 2018, after many, many years of doing a lot of hard work, we decided to start our own company. And so we did that in 2018. But the other thing I want you to know about Tracy and I is we are also very good friends. We're BFFs, and our husbands are best friends as well. And we love to travel together and play cards and golf. And so we have a whole playful side to us as well.
There you go.
Yes.
My mother-in-law was loved to play cards, and we would all play cards with her. And we always said she cheats because she always won. I mean, always won. So we love to say that she cheated, but you know, she didn't, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, you'd like to think she was cheating anyway, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of more fun, you know, it's an excuse anyway to, you know, to say that. But
Yeah.
she loved to play Liverpool, rummy, and just all sorts of things, and had a lot of fun, and we all did. It was fun to play with her. Occasionally, she let us win. That's our line anyway.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow, we like euchre, and it's always the girls against the guys. And so, you know, yeah, sometimes we think they're cheating, and sometimes they think we are too.
I won't tell.
Okay, you don't tell.
Well, Tracy, what do you want to add to you? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, so I'm a respiratory therapist by profession, and actually, you know, I had, you know, this experience that Michelle and I had in working with healthcare organizations all across the country really was my learning ground for leadership. And but I'm a learner. That's one of my strengths. And so I reached a point where, you know, that real life experience just wasn't quite enough. And I knew I was missing something in my education. So I went back to school to get my bachelor's. And then I was egged on to get my master's. And then lo and behold, I found myself getting a PhD. So I was on like a 13-year journey of just going back to school to get a degree, but I got multiple ones. And it was really driven by my passion for interprofessional collaboration, really bringing teams together with diverse experiences to work together and deliver services. And a lot of that was, you know, kind of Michelle and I in that journey together, right? We were doing interprofessional work and healthcare organizations before it was cool, before anybody really knew what it was. And we partnered on so many projects together, and that's what really, you know, led to my passion to get a PhD in interprofessional healthcare studies. But we actually met in high hospital orientation. So it was, kind of the stand up and shake the hand of the person behind you. And that was me. And we like to say we've been shaking hands ever since. And in our course of our journey as leaders and working with many leaders across North America, we really saw the challenges that they faced. And everybody thinks their challenges are unique, right, to us. But they're not. And we saw the pattern across multiple leaders, multiple organizations. They were facing the same challenges over and over and over and unable to resolve them. They were unsolvable problems. And we had had the great fortune to be exposed to polarity thinking from Barry Johnson, and had leveraged that in our work. And so we knew when we left corporate America in 2017 that we were destined to do something really important. And we decided what was really important was to bring this missing logic or this competency to healthcare leaders and to leaders in general all across the world. So that's what we're doing now.
Wow. So Michelle, Tracy was a respiratory therapist. What were you?
I was a nurse.
Ah, okay.
Still am.
And still am. So you guys met at hospital orientation, so you didn't know each other growing up in school?
No.
No.
Wow.
No, we didn't even grow up on the same side of the state. I grew up on the east side. She grew up on the west side. So we didn't meet till we were adults orienting to a new healthcare system.
Now, where do you guys live now?
Well, I live just outside of Grand Rapids in a community called Hudsonville, Michigan. So still in West Michigan.
Yeah. And I live 3 hours north in a small resort town called Boyne City near Lake Michigan.
Ah.
And then I'm here in the spring and the summer, early fall. And then I go to California in the winter. I don't like snow and cold weather.
Smart move.
So I bug out. I leave her here and I bug out.
Know.
She comes to visit though.
Why don't you come to California too?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of these days.
So where in California? Where in California do you go?
I go to Ukiah.
Okay.
Northern California. Northern California. Napa. Yeah.
Right. I lived in Novato for 12 years. And so we loved to go to Napa. Well, I've been to Ukiah, but we loved Napa. We were 45 minutes, maybe an hour away from Napa. We went up there and joined the Gloria Ferrara Wine Club, which was great because if you go there as a member, you get 4 free glasses of, I call them champagne. They say sparkling wine because they don't want to tick off the French, but say what you want. So I'm still a member, even though my wife has passed. The problem is I'm not drinking it as fast as it comes in because I'm just not that much of a wine drinker. So I'm going to have to find a way to start dealing with that. I may have to call on healthcare to save me if I do too much of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But still, well, so what? So Michelle, you didn't. So you went to college?
Yes, I did. I got my bachelor's at Grand Valley State University here in West Michigan, and my master's in nursing there as well.
But you haven't been persuaded to go off and get a PhD to have equal billing or something like that?
No, I was told by my husband and my best friend, Tracy, I was not allowed to do that.
She doesn't need it.
She did.
Yeah. I have a master's degree and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It works out.
I am too. And after watching Tracy and her journey, I'm a good cheerleader.
That's a whole nother podcast, Michael.
There's always student loan debt, right? So
I didn't have any of that. I just had some challenging journey, but it was all done for me. And maybe who I am today, I'm grateful for the whole thing.
And I understand. We all are a product of our choices, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Well, you talk about this new competency that you're teaching leaders and all. Before I ask you specifically about that, why did you decide specifically to start a company to deal with addressing issues for leaders and so on?
Well, because no one was talking about this really, or maybe just small pockets of people. And we knew what a game changer it was. And we had applied it into our own lives, both personally, and we had helped organizations. And I can tell you, Tracy and I do a lot of speaking. And whenever we would introduce this polarity concept or having a polarity mindset to an audience, people always got excited. They would say things like, "Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense." Or "I always knew these things were connected, but I never knew how." And it has such implications because we waste so much time, money, and resources trying to fix the same problems when they're not really problems. They really are polarities. And so we just knew this was something that was very needed. And we knew it starts with the leadership. If the leadership doesn't understand it, the staff don't have a chance, and the organizations will never be able to sustain a lot of the hard work they put into fixing problems. So that was our thing. We're like, we're going to go out there and we're going to bring this to the world. And we named it Missing Logic because it's missing.
Yeah, I hear you. What do you mean by polarities?
So polarities are interdependent pairs of values or points of view or perspectives. And they appear to be contradictory or opposing to each other, but they are interdependent and they need each other over time to reach a greater purpose that neither value would alone. So, when we have problems, we use either or thinking. We get a couple different solutions, we pick the one we want to apply, and we're done. But polarities are ongoing, they never end. And that's why these challenges that leaders were facing and trying to apply either or thinking to wasn't working, right? Because you can't treat a polarity that way. You have to use what we call a both and mindset, because these values are interdependent and need each other.
Yeah. Well, you've written a book about all of this with polarities too, haven't you? When did you write that?
During COVID.
Good time to do it.
Yeah, there you go. What else are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, right.
We were locked up and we said, okay, this and no, the other thing too, Michael, that was really great is we worked with leaders during COVID. We did virtual coaching sessions, virtual mentorship programs. So we were learning a ton. And then we thought this is the perfect time to write this book. So the name of the book is Polarity, Intelligence, the Missing Logic in Leadership. And what we're so proud of is we were able to take all the concepts we've been working with, having a polarity or both and mindset, the need to have healthy relationships to engage your workforce and your colleagues and your family in a way that you come together with intention and you have a shared purpose with why you are together, and meaningful dialogue. And when you're dealing with polarities and they cause tension, it's really important to have the communication skills, the dialogue skills to invite conversation, to understand those different perspectives as well. So we put all of those together and call it now Polarity Intelligence. And we have the first book coming out with it. So it's pretty exciting.
So is Polarity Intelligence out?
It is available for pre-order right now.
Okay.
So you can go to your favorite bookstore and buy it and pre-order. It's going to be released on January 16th, 2024. And hot off the press, we just found out today we already hit the bestseller list on Barnes & Noble.
Wow.
Get out the bubbles, Michael.
Yeah, I'm going to go get one of those bottles of champagne here.
Yeah.
But I don't want to drink in front of you, so that's okay. That is exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
That's happening.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me, I guess, a little bit more about this whole concept of polarity intelligence, and how do you teach it to people, and and how is it received? I guess from a book standpoint, it's received well, but in general, when you're dealing with people, how do they receive it or deal with it?
Well, that's a great question. So let's start with a little bit more about it, so so your listeners kind of have some context to what we're talking about. And a really easy way to understand a polarity is inhaling and exhaling, because that is a polarity our body manages for us all day, every day. And we have to inhale to receive oxygen and exhale to remove carbon dioxide. And the greater purpose of that is to sustain life. And it's the only polarity that's leveraged or managed for us. And our body just takes care of that. And so we kind of really start there with helping people to understand what a polarity is in and of itself. And then our overall objective is to help them to understand how polarities work, because there's some various principles that they operate on. And as an example, when you have a polarity, you have two poles, they're interdependent and they need each other. So one is not more important than the other. So inhaling is not more important than exhaling. I have to have both if I want to sustain life. And if I don't have both, I'm going to die, right? That's the negative consequence. Another principle that we teach people is that when you overemphasize one pole and you neglect the other, there's always a negative consequence. Mm-hmm. You are always going to lose the positive benefits of the pole that you neglect. So there's always a consequence to that. And then I think the other thing too is really what we want to do is leverage these healthy relationships and the meaningful dialogue when we sit in conversation with them. If you think about the tensions we've experienced as people in our countries, internationally, people are walking away from conversations because they don't want to engage, right? It's some very high values people hold dearly, and it can create significant tension. And so to sit in that tension and to sit in those contradictory or opposing perspectives, you really have to have a strong relationship, and you have to know how to have conversation. So we teach them the principles around healthy relationships, and we teach them the principles of dialogue so that they can really transcend their own personal biases and open up to hear the perspectives of others, because both perspectives are right. One is not more right than the other. It's just really understanding how the two work together. So those are a few ways that we kind of set some context for them and then teach them the principles of how polarities operate so they can understand it is a universal principle. So it applies to everybody. You can't ignore it. It's like gravity, we like to say. It's always there. They're always working on you. There's thousands of them. And you really have to be able to recognize them to leverage them. So that's the initial steps, is to help them understand them, recognize them, begin to leverage them, and develop the skills of healthy relationships and meaningful dialogue so they can do that as easily as possible.
If you would, give me an example of polarities in business or leadership, to do some sort of concrete example if you can.
Sure. So again, they're everywhere, but in businesses, doesn't matter if it's a small business like ours or a really large business, they all deal with the same polarities. And probably a very common one is margin and mission, right? You have to always be balancing the margin coming into the organization so you can grow and thrive. And you have to be focused on mission of why you exist in order to create a sustainable business. So that's a major one. Another one for businesses that we run into all the time, and we leverage these in our business, Michael, is individual and team. So every person in a business or a company has a role, has a purpose. They need to practice or deliver their services the best they can individually, and they're part of a team. So how the team works together is equally important. And you need to get that polarity right-sized and well-balanced. So that's another common one. Also process and progress, right? You have to have infrastructures, processes to run a business, and you need to be marking progress as you grow as well. And so that's another polarity that we use in our business. And there's a lot more. Now, leadership, I'm glad you said leadership too, because there's also polarities that you have to leverage as a leader, such as candor and diplomacy. Your communication, again, is really important. And even leading and managing is a polarity. They have different attributes, they have different skills. And so we work with leaders on that one as well.
Too many bosses think they're leaders. You're with me. You're right there with me. Too many bosses think they're leaders, and they may not be leaders at all. And you're right, they are totally different things. I know that, and I've talked about it here before, that when I hire salespeople, one of the things I've always told them was, look, I hired you. I'm not here to boss you around. And my job, I believe, is to find ways to add value to you to help you be more successful. And you and I have to figure that out together. And that's a lot different than so many bosses would do. They miss the whole point of what would really make them a much more effective leader of the people they work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And at the same time, you need some of those strengths of the manager, right? The one that's going to make sure everything gets done and has all the processes and the infrastructure that manages that. So that's why you have to have both, but it's balancing that, knowing when the manager needs to step up and knowing when the leader needs to step up in you, right? And you apply those, you're looking for those outcomes simultaneously, but at different times you're going to need to be more of a manager, and at different times you need to be more of a leader. And so it's really understanding that.
But I think the real issue is that people that work for you need to understand when you're a manager, why you're a manager. In other words, you do have to set the boundaries. You do have to set the rules.
Yeah.
And people who understand that and internalize it will be a lot happier and a lot more successful in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which is kind of really important to be able to do. But it really is a fascinating concept to do this. How do you so you've been doing this now since, you said, what, 2017, 2018?
Well, as a business, but we've been managing polarities for over 20 years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But now you have your own business that you're doing it. How do you teach it?
Well, we teach it in various ways. Our most common way these days is virtually. And actually, we like to tell the story that Tracy and I got Zoom before anyone knew what it was, it seemed like. So we do virtual education, virtual coaching. We have virtual mentorship programs. And it's amazing how much teaching and application and connection you can do over the internet. But we also teach it in keynote speeches, just the concept to leaders. And we teach it in workshops. We have a group of leaders that they love this so much. They're in a mastermind group. We work with them over the year, and they just deepen their understanding. They achieve incredible outcomes. We get together face to face twice a year at a retreat location. And we do a lot with the whole polarity intelligence with them through those different experiences. And we teach it on our podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, from a kind of a concrete perspective, you can map a polarity. So we really use blueprints and maps so that people can make the polarity that they are trying to leverage concrete and actionable. So in these in-person settings, we actually put a big polarity map on the floor, and we walk this polarity map with them and help them to really dive deep and understand what the polarity really is, which is the outcomes that they want, the consequences they'll experience, right? The actions they need to take, and the early warning signs that will keep them on track and keep them from over focusing or emphasizing one or the other. So that's really a fun exercise, and leaders love to kind of really step into it in that real in-person way.
Makes a lot of sense. Have you found people who resist it?
I have not found anybody who resisted it yet.
That's great.
I haven't either.
Yeah,
I think because they have an experience of it, but they didn't know what it was. So we often have people come up to us and say, oh my gosh, I finally know what it is I've been experiencing. I finally have words to describe it. And that's the benefit. When we're teaching it, is they have experienced it like we experience gravity, but they didn't have a common language to explain what it was and how it felt. And now they do. So when they read the book, or when we teach it, they'll have that common language and way to describe what it is that they're experiencing, and others will understand it as well.
That is pretty cool. And I was going to say earlier, I forgot, you do have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
Well, our podcast is in transition right now.
Ah, there you go.
But
From one pole to the other, or couldn't resist.
Oh, good job.
that was really great. That was really
You
great.
like that? It's yours. You can have it.
Yeah. Well, we started a podcast in 2019. The name of it is Healthcare's Missing Logic Podcast. Of course, our audience at that time was primarily healthcare leaders. But as we grew and as more people listened to us, we got asked, do you work with other leaders? Do you work with educators? Can you go work with Congress? I mean, we've had some interesting...
Yeah, well, there's another story there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another podcast episode.
It's another whole podcast, but yeah.
And now we have really developed a really robust, thriving, resilient, unstoppable, we call it True Leader Mentorship Program. And we attract leaders that want to have thriving, resilient, unstoppable, which is why we like being on your podcast, lives. And so we just, we're going to change it to be more, it's going to be the True Leader Podcast. And it's really focused on balancing, leading, and living to represent both personal and professional poles as a leader. And
that brings up a very important point. You've got to have that life balance between living and working, or living and leading on the job and all that. And I'm sure that must be one of the big issues that all too many people are victims of, if you will, that you find, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
How do you get them to deal with that? Well, I got to spend this time at my company. I can't not do that.
Well, that really comes in our True Leader Mentorship Program, because it starts with understanding polarities, and that your professional life and your personal life is a polarity, that work-life balance isn't a problem to solve. It's not an either or, and that you actually have to give attention to both your personal life and professional life to get that highest quality life that you want to really thrive both at work and at home. And so we've developed a framework that's called the Dynamic Balance Effect Framework. And it has combination of strategies that, when you put them together, enables leaders to create a dynamic balanced lifestyle, and it becomes a part of who they are. So they leverage polarities. They learn about that polarity. They create a blueprint, their own unique blueprint for how they're going to manage the tension between the two, both the professional life and the personal life. And that's one aspect of it. And then we also help them to understand one of the other pillars that we have is mindful choices. And we're always making choices, Michael. Sometimes we're aware of the choices we're making. Sometimes we make them unconsciously, but we're always making choices and living with the results of those choices. And what we want is make choices that are based on our highest values, that are aligned with who we are, that help us to be in integrity. We want to make sure we're aligned to the values, we're clear on the values, and we live by our principles. And so we really help them to get that clarity, identify who it is they need to be in this new life that they're designing. And then another pillar really is personal alignment. And this is about harnessing tools and processes and infrastructures that help them to really experience the peace and joy in the life that they want, because they're aligning their actions to the essence of who they really are. They know what their purpose is. They know their strengths. Everything becomes a little bit more easy and effortless when you have that clarity. And so we kind of use these three pillars combined together to help them get that dynamic balance effect. And it's a lot of reflection and looking at the beliefs that we hold, the norms that we operate under, and letting go of some things that don't serve us. And sometimes those are blind spots. And so we shine a light on the blind spots, help them reveal them, and then work through processes to overcome them.
What kind of a process do you go through to analyze any given individual or leader in terms of determining how best to apply the dynamic balance effect framework to them, or to bring them into it? I mean, because obviously you have to while you have similarities, each case is different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a couple different things we do. We can do polarity assessments. So we actually have a methodology where we can actually assess how well you're managing different polarities. You know, how well are you managing your personal life and your professional life, your activity and rest, caring for yourself and caring for others. And we can show them and then help them create more effective action steps and coach them around that. And then when it comes to personal alignment, we do spend a lot of time just getting to know their strengths. So we have various assessments that we do for that to really determine how are they wired, really what makes them tick, because everybody is different. And then they are able to apply those results to their blueprints and their other tools that we provide them so they actually can accelerate and meet the goals that they're going after. And so those are just some ways where we do measurement, and we also track progress with their goals over time as well. And they've had amazing transformation results. It's been so much fun.
Well, they do a life inventory as well. So they look at their life from a lot of different perspectives, all the components of their life, and they have others also look at their life, and others do the polarity assessment to get a perspective outside of themselves. So we invite them to have people closest to them, give them some real, candid perspectives about what they see in their life. And that's also very helpful for them. When it comes down to it, it's up to them to decide what's the highest priority polarity for me. What's the highest priority skill or habit I need to develop? And we just can, provide them with the guidance and coach them along the way to remove any barriers. Just keep getting the barriers out of the way, because that's really 90% of it. just getting the barriers out of the way. We know what we need to do. We just don't do it, right?
Well, you're right. And also, all too often, people are so resistive to change. They're resistive to really analyzing themselves because we don't teach people how to do that. I'm a great fan of introspection, spending time at the end of the day, what went well, what didn't go well, even what went well, could I have done it better? And I have grown to not liking to use the term failure, other than it's an opportunity to look at what I did and figure out how to do it better. But we become so defeatist so often. And I hear all the time, people are afraid of public speaking, and it's one of people's greatest fears. And it shouldn't be if we would learn what public speaking is really all about, which is talking with an audience, not to an audience. And again, it's just the kind of thing that people are so resistive to so many of the kinds of concepts I think that you're talking about. And leaders hopefully are in general a little bit different because they are leaders and they're open to it, or you are able to work with them to get them to that point, but it must be a challenge.
Well, the truth is we're wired to stay in our comfort zones, right? Our brains are wired to keep us safe. And so we have, we react physically when we're uncertain about the future or what experience we're going to have. So any uncertainty can unleash a sense of anxiety in us, or we can hear that little chatter in our brain. Oh, no, you don't need to do that. You just stay right where you're at. It's really nice and comfortable here. It's not easy, but you know what you're dealing with. So this is a lot better than going out there and trying something different. What if you fail? And our brains, our subconscious feeds us all this. So it's really just increasing awareness of what we're saying to ourselves and how our brain is trying to keep us safe. It's what it's designed to do, but that's only because it doesn't know that it's okay to step out of the comfort zone. And so we really do a lot of coaching around that aspect, because those are the things mostly that hold us back. It's not, we just resist because it's ingrained in us to resist. It's a part of our brain. So we have to train our brain. No, you know what? Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I appreciate what you're trying to do, but it's really okay for me to make this chance. It's really okay for me to take this chance to step out and do this. And you have to just kind of work with yourself around that.
I agree. I hear what you're saying. It's the other side of it, though, is that we don't teach people to deal with fear. I know that for me, having been in the World Trade Center and escaping people always say, well, you weren't afraid because you couldn't see what was going on. And it's so difficult to get people to understand. Keep in mind that the airplane in our building hit on, if I were to average it, between 93 and 99 floor, the 96th floor on the north side of the building, and I was on the south side of the building on the 78th floor. How was I supposed to know what happened? The last time I checked, X-ray vision and Superman are fiction, right? And the reality is, going down the stairs, no one knew. No one knew that we had been attacked by terrorists. We figured out that an airplane hit the building because we were smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. And I identified that odor about 4 floors down from when we entered the stairwell. So it was probably about the 74th floor that I figured out that's the fumes from burning jet fuel. And we figured that out. But I wasn't afraid going down the stairs for, I think, a couple of reasons. One is I always liked the concept, don't worry about what you can't control, focus on what you can and leave the rest alone because you can't do anything about it anyway. I didn't articulate that for the longest period of time, but I think that is something that's been in my makeup for a long time. The other part about it is, however, that I think that fear is something that is all too often taught, and that if you have knowledge, and it's essentially what you're talking about, with knowledge, you can learn not to be blinded by fear, as I call it, or paralyzed by fear, or overwhelmed, whatever you want to call it, but that fear can in fact become a powerful tool for you, not against you. And so I'm actually working on a book about that. With a colleague, we've written a book about that. And the idea is that you can learn to control fear. And yeah, you may have some reactions when something doesn't go just the way you think, but you can learn to control your fears and allow yourself to be able to move forward in a much more organized way, that you don't have to let fear overwhelm you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important to know, where's the fear coming from?
Right.
What is it that we're afraid of, right? And I think working through those processes, sometimes just getting that deeper understanding can help you release that fear and realize, well, really, there isn't nothing terrible is going to happen, right? In many instances. So it's just kind of really getting to know yourself and where your fears come from, I think, is a very healthy way to look at fear.
And that's a lot of it. And the reality is that we're not encouraged to do that kind of self-reflecting and self-analysis and internalizing of what's going on. So the result is we react rather than thinking more about it, which is, in a sense, maybe another kind of missing logic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Right.
But
and it comes from our past. So to your point, because we haven't been educated or trained or haven't learned for that self-reflection and right to do all that from the time we were children, we just respond based on our past programming, based on the things that we've experienced in the past. That's how our brain gets wired. So we don't have that to draw from. So we have to build that skill, to your point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I know for me, having been blind my whole life, I've been in a lot of situations where there have been unpredictable kinds of circumstances. I mean, heck, anytime I cross the street, there's the potential of a car coming down the street that I missed or that isn't stopping. And I always have to be alert. What am I going to do about that? Or when I lived in Massachusetts for 3 years, I lived in the state that had the reputation of having had the highest accident rate per capita in the country. And I'm sitting there crossing the street with all these crazy cars coming down the street. So for me, I learned that I have to be observant and not be afraid. Otherwise, why go out at all? And so that doesn't mean that you just go put yourself in danger, but it does mean that you can deal with different things that go on.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Great point.
So it becomes one of the issues to deal with. Well, so we wrote a book about it called Live Like a Guide Dog. And the point is that I've had a number of guide dogs and other dogs in my life. And the idea is that dogs can fear, but more often than not, fear is learned. Like my 5th guide dog, Roselle, was not afraid of thunder at all until we moved to New Jersey and lived there for almost a year before she started exhibiting fear reactions and shaking and shivering whenever there was a thunderstorm coming. What we also learned is that a lot of that had to do with the fact that as the storm would approach, the static buildup on her fur gave her this prickly, uncomfortable feeling. And then you get the thunder that goes with it. It caused kind of a fear reaction. And again, now we know more about dealing with that. And there are ways to teach dogs that they don't need to be afraid of thunder. Treats always help, but that's a part of it. But the reality is, again, I think it's as true for humans. We need to learn that we can analyze what's going on, as you said earlier, and use that to better analyze ourselves and go, well, why are we reacting to this?
Right.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of time obviously working with the people who you have the opportunity to work with to get them to analyze all that. How long do you end up on average working with clients, or is it kind of almost a lifelong kind of thing?
Well, sometimes they might be with us just for a 12-month program. And sometimes we've had leaders with us going on 4 years. So it just really depends on what their needs are, what their, what their goals are. But we do have some that, they just love working with us.
That's fine.
Well,
they're
it's a community, right?
Yeah.
It's a community.
Yeah, it's a community.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And they like being a part of that community, and
Yes.
supporting each other, learning from each other. And so that's another aspect of the work that we do. We really are strong believers in community and the support of community. And we know leaders are longing for that right now. And especially leaders that find themselves in environments that don't feel psychologically safe. They're really looking to connect with others that are experiencing some of the same things they're experiencing. And so we do have an ongoing community that people engage in as well.
Yeah.
Community is a very strong tool that can help a lot too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which is really pretty cool. Well, leaders are people. How come leaders often suffer from burnout? How come that happens?
Well, what happens when in leadership roles, sometimes what happens is you're with other leaders and there's an expectation of behavior and thoughts that are based on shared beliefs of how you should act as a leader, that's just the way things are here. And then you become even maybe unaware that you are doing those behaviors or having those thoughts. And so what happens is leaders just develop what Tracy and I call leadership norms. And those norms can actually be harmful over time. So an example of one is servant leadership. Servant leadership is a good thing, and it reinforces everybody before me. The leader eats last. And over time, that has a negative impact on the leader, and they do suffer from exhaustion and burnout. And, we have learned a lot from the airline industry that there's a reason why they have you put your oxygen mask on first so that you can help others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a norm for leaders to do that. They always think about, even during COVID, they thought more about their teams than they did about themselves. And, just how hard you have to work as a leader. There's a whole norm around that. Long hours, work hard, climbing the ladder. And another metaphor that Tracy and I like to use is, marathon runners know they have to pace themselves. And you don't become a marathon runner, by running 26 miles the day of the race. You have to practice the polarity of activity and rest. And that's a lot like leadership. We're in it for the long haul. We have to learn how to care for ourselves and care for others. And what leaders are developing is what Tracy and I call the imbalanced leader syndrome. And we see it all the time. We have leaders every week that say, yep, I have that, because they got overflowing to-do lists of competing priorities. Their financial and people resources are limited, which causes stress. They lack balance between their work and home, and they're basically just exhausted and unfulfilled. And they know, I think the key thing right now is they're really wondering if they can continue. And so they don't have a strategy for work-life balance. That's the other thing that we really help them with. But that's some of the reasons we see leaders get burned out.
Yeah. And, I like the concept, and I've always liked the concept of servant leadership, but I do understand that it can be carried too far, and that we need to understand that the best servants are the ones who really are prepared to do it. And it's okay to be, and I think is appropriate to be, if you are a leader, a servant, because your job is to help. But at the same time, you can't do that if you're not properly prepared either.
Right. Well, when it's good until the point where you start to neglect yourself. And what happens is they prioritize everybody before themselves, and then they start to neglect their needs, neglect what's important to them, and they start to make mistakes, which cause burnout, right? Like making themselves available and accessible 24/7, and saying yes when they to requests when they really want to say no, and bringing work home and staying late and working on vacation and sacrificing time with family and friends to work. And all of those things add up and build up over time. And that's what, can also lead to that imbalanced leader syndrome, or to burnout and exhaustion, because they don't give themselves the rest and the things that they need to thrive and survive. And we're not saying don't serve, to your point too,
right,
but take care of yourself so that you can be that incredible leader you want to be. Because the stronger your personal life is, the more, resilience you're going to have, the more mental clarity you're going to have, the more stamina you're going to have, the more ability you're going to have to serve the way that you want to serve.
My most graphic example of that actually relates to one of my guide dogs, my 6th guide dog, Meryl. Got Meryl in 2007. Roselle had to retire. And she had guided for 8 years, but she also contracted an immune disease, immune-mediated thrombocytopenia. So her body was going after her immune system was going after platelets and so on. Anyway, so Meryl came along and it looked well for a little while, but then we started noticing that Meryl wouldn't play with the other dogs. We had 2 other dogs in the house, Roselle, the retired guide dog, and we also were what were called breeder keepers for guide dogs for the blind. The breeding stock would not stay in kennels all the time, but would live in people's homes, except when they were doing their puppy things. So Meryl wouldn't play with the other dogs, and it got worse and worse. And as I eventually described it, she had a type A personality. She could not leave work at the office. She wouldn't play with them. She followed me everywhere. And if they tried to play, she actually curled her lip a few times. And eventually, after about 18 months of, well, it wasn't even that, it was about 14 months of guiding, she started becoming very fearful of even guiding and wearing a guide dog harness. And eventually, the people at Guide Dogs for the Blind observed her and agreed, and we had to retire her because she was just afraid to guide anymore. She just couldn't handle the stress of guiding on top of the stress that she was putting on herself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the result is that, she did retire. And then we got Africa, who was my 7th guide dog, whose mother was the breeder dog that we were caring for, which was just sort of a coincidence. But Africa was the total opposite of Meryl. Africa did fine around people. And now we have Alamo, and he does well. But it is interesting because to talk about Meryl, she just got to the point where she could not take the stress. And it was more self-imposed, although she never realized it, of course, but it was.
Yeah. Well, and that's true for people too, right? Some of these norms are self-imposed and we follow them, and we don't have to, but people need permission to let it go.
Yeah.
They need to know it's okay to do something different, to behave differently. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really the whole issue, is that
Right.
you've got to learn that. And that was something that we could never teach Meryl,
Right.
no matter what we tried. And so it just didn't work out that way, but it's just one of those things. But for me, it's a really graphic example of what you're talking about. And the other, if I were to also ask this, I just thought about it. We've been talking about leaders. What is a leader? How's that for a general question?
Well, sometimes we say everybody's a leader.
Yeah, there you are.
I think there's leader roles in pretty much everywhere, in organizations, in churches, in schools, in businesses, certainly in families, there's leaders, and everyone can step into a leadership role and I think have leadership qualities. I think there's the title, but there's also attributes of leadership that anybody can really exhibit.
Yeah. And I think that's holding the vision, right?
Yes.
Whether it's a family or an organization, it's really, somebody that holds the vision for who we are, where we're headed. They, to your point earlier, right? They're nurturing the people that are doing the work or taking the actions to move closer to the vision. And they're just that, they're kind of that, they're just that nurturing. They create a nurturing environment and a healthy environment that enables people to bring their gifts. They lean into the strengths of others, and they bring people together. They connect people to move the efforts forward, to move and strive towards the goals or the vision of who you are and what you're trying to achieve. And they kind of hold that container for people to really step into all they can be and guide those individuals and groups and teams, I think.
I also think that from a leader standpoint, one of the things that I have found is that true people who lead also know when it's time to let someone else take the lead on some given thing because they have some gift or tool that will serve the team better than the so-called leader. And I think that's, again, one of the differences going back to near the beginning of today between a leader and a boss, because I don't think that bosses necessarily know that unless they truly understand leadership.
Yeah, well, there's a polarity on leading and following too. Sometimes you have to know when to follow, right? And sometimes you need to know when to lead. So, yeah.
For me, again, going back to guide dogs, people mostly don't understand what a guide dog does. The purpose of a guide dog is to make sure that we walk safely. The dog doesn't know where I want to go or how to get there. And very frankly, I don't want the dog to know where to go and how to get there because that's not their job. And how are they going to know? And too many people think, oh, it's amazing how your dog just knows everything. Well, that's not quite the way it works. But it's also true that we, in every sense of the word, form a team. The dog has a job to do. I have a job to do. And we need to build up an extremely high level of trust and understanding that we both know what our jobs are and we know what the other individual's job is, so that we can be the most successful as we're walking somewhere or going from place to place that we can. And again, it works really well when the dog knows that it can respect me and that I'm going to respect the job of the dog, and give the dog the support it needs, because the dog in turn will do the same for me. Dogs want somebody to be, as Cesar Milano would say, a pack leader. But at the same time, in the case of a guide dog and person, there are times when the dog will be able to take the initiative and should.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see it and really understand it when it happens. Well, if people want to reach out to you guys and make contact and so on, and maybe explore working with you, how do they do that?
Well, the best thing to do is to go to our website, which is missinglogic.com. And both of our emails are on the website. So that's really great. And we also have a large LinkedIn following. And our handle for LinkedIn is Missing Logic LLC. So that's another great place to find us and kind of follow what we're doing. And then we're also in the process of starting a Polarity Intelligence website for our book. So there will be information about the book, information about us as authors. And so that's another place where listeners can go.
When the book comes out, are you looking to make it an audiobook as well? One would hope.
Yes.
Yes.
Hint, hint, hint.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It takes a little bit. It
Yeah,
takes a
it
little
takes-
bit of time after the book has to be out for a little bit before we can start that process. So, but yes, definitely.
Are you self-publishing or do you have a publisher?
We have a publisher, Morgan
Oh, great.
James Publishing. Mhm.
I'm sorry, what company?
Morgan James
Morgan
Publishing.
James. Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, it's exciting that it's coming out. And the name of the book again?
Polarity Intelligence, the Missing Logic in Leadership.
There you go. Well, I hope people will seek out the book and they will seek out you. I think it's important to do that. And I think that you offer a lot. I certainly have appreciated you being here. Are there any kind of last things that you want to offer to people before we wrap this up?
Well, I just want to thank you again, Michael. It's been just a joy to get to know you and the Unstoppable podcast and the great work that you're doing in the world. And just, we knew it was going to be a great conversation. It was. So just leaving full of gratitude.
Yes. Thank you so much, Michael. It's really been a pleasure.
Well,
Appreciate the opportunity.
I as well. This has been absolutely enjoyable, and we should do it again sometime after the book comes out. I'm sure you'll have lots more stories to tell.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we will.
Let's do it. Well,
Let's do it.
Thank you both again. And I want to thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. And Tracy and Michelle have a lot to offer. So please go seek them out. And I am sure if you are dealing with any kind of leadership issues or whatever, they will help you deal with the polarities and fix it. And they're absolutely right. Both sides of a pole or both polarities in anything have to be there or it doesn't work. I love to talk about magnets. You need a North Pole and a South Pole. And the reality is that one doesn't really make the process work very well. You do have to have both.
Yeah.
So thanks again for listening to us. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you. Please email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. Accessibe is spelled ACCESSIBE. And it's Michael, MICHAEL, at or go to our podcast page, www.michael, MICHAEL, Hingson, HINGSON.com/podcast. And wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We love those and really appreciate that and your reviews. We value your input and your thoughts very highly. And for both of you, as well as all of you listening, if you know anyone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. We're always looking for more people to bring on and have on as guests and have more fun conversations. So please don't hesitate to make any recommendations that you have. And so one last time, Tracy and Michelle, I want to thank you both for being here very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.